In the bitter winter of 1873, the German immigrant community nestled in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, found itself gripped by a quiet unease, their conversations hushed and laden with apprehension. Whispers circulated through the frosty air about an 11-year-old girl named Emma Richter, a pale, reserved child whose extraordinary abilities both fascinated and frightened her neighbors. With her large, unblinking gray eyes, Emma could perform feats that defied comprehension. She calculated the day of the week for any date in human history in mere seconds, recalled entire conversations verbatim after hearing them only once, and counted the precise number of steps between any two buildings in the tightly knit German quarter. To the modern mind, her abilities might suggest a rare neurological condition, a marvel of cognitive wiring. But to the superstitious residents of 1873 Milwaukee, Emma's gifts were an enigma, either a divine miracle bestowed upon their community or a sinister force cloaked in the guise of a child. The air grew heavier with dread when Emma began to wield her talents in unsettling ways, exposing long-buried secrets, foretelling fatal accidents, and recounting intimate details of crimes that no living soul should have known. By the time spring thawed the frozen streets, the community would be forever changed. 3 men would lie dead, a family would vanish under cover of night, and Emma Richter herself would disappear, leaving behind only a cryptic leather journal filled with numbers that no one dared decipher. Before we delve deeper into this chilling tale of Emma Richter and the dark truths her extraordinary mind uncovered in Milwaukee's German quarter, make sure to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell. Every week, we unearth haunting historical mysteries that resonate with the shadows of the past. Share in the comments which state or city you're tuning in from, because stories like Emma's unfolded in communities just like yours, closer to home than you might imagine. Milwaukee's German quarter in 1873 was a vibrant enclave, a slice of Bavaria transplanted to the shores of Lake Michigan. The neighborhood thrummed with the clatter of horse-drawn carts and the rich malty aroma wafting from red brick breweries that defined the city's identity. Nearly 8,000 German immigrants called this area home, their lives woven together by shared language, culture, and labor. Modest wooden homes lined the streets, their windows glowing with lamplight as families gathered for hearty meals of sauerkraut and rye bread. Beer gardens buzzed with laughter and the clink of steins, while bakeries filled the air with the scent of fresh pretzels and strudel, evoking memories of the Rhineland. The men toiled in breweries like Schlitz, Best, and countless smaller operations that fueled Milwaukee's reputation as America's beer capital. Their wives tended gardens, coaxing cabbages and potatoes from the Wisconsin soil, in patterns their ancestors had followed for generations. Amid this industrious community lived Heinrich and Greta Richter, who had arrived from Bavaria in 1861, chasing dreams of a prosperous new life with their infant daughter, Emma. Heinrich secured steady work as a brewmaster at the Kellner Brewery, a mid-sized operation that kept the city's saloons well supplied. Greta supplemented their income by taking in laundry and mending, her fingers deftly working needle and thread, late into the night. The Richters were an ordinary family in every way, except for their daughter, whose extraordinary mind would soon cast a long shadow over their unassuming lives. Emma Richter was born during a perilous Atlantic crossing, 3 weeks premature and so frail that the ship's doctor doubted she would survive the journey to America. Yet she defied the odds, though she remained small and ghostly pale, her enormous gray eyes seeming to absorb the world with an intensity that unnerved those who met her gaze. As a toddler, Emma was eerily quiet, rarely crying or seeking attention, preferring instead to sit in corners, observing the bustle of adult life with a stillness that seemed almost unnatural. By the age of 4, her parents began to notice peculiarities that set her apart. She could recite entire conversations she had overheard days earlier, mimicking the exact tones and accents of the speakers. She counted everything obsessively, the stitches in her mother's embroidery, the steps from their doorstep to the bakery, the precise seconds between the brewery whistles that marked the start and end of the workday. When Heinrich introduced her to basic arithmetic, Emma's mind latched onto numbers with a ferocity that startled him. She solved complex problems in her head faster than he could scratch them out on paper, her calculations unfolding with a precision that seemed to transcend her tender years. The German community regarded Emma with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Old Mrs. Brennan, whose grandmother had told tales of witch trials in the old country, made the sign of the cross whenever Emma's piercing gaze fell upon her. Yet Father Koller, the robust Bavarian priest of their small Catholic parish, proclaimed Emma's abilities a divine gift, a sign of God's favor bestowed upon their community in the New World. The winter of 1872–73 was one of the harshest in memory, with temperatures so low that Lake Michigan froze into a vast sheet of ice, a phenomenon unseen in decades. Inside their homes, brewery workers huddled around coal stoves, their breath visible in the frigid air, while their wives struggled to keep their families warm and fed through the relentless cold. The isolation of that winter amplified the community's insularity, and it was during these dark, snowbound months that Emma's abilities began to take on a more ominous character. She developed a habit of sitting by the small, frost-rimmed window in the Richter's kitchen, her gray eyes tracking the movements of neighbors with the same meticulous focus she applied to mathematical problems. Emma began to notice patterns not only in numbers but in human behavior, her mind cataloging the routines of the German quarter with unnerving precision. She observed that Mr. Kruger always took exactly 247 steps to the brewery, except on Wednesdays, when he inexplicably chose a longer route, requiring 284 steps. She noted that Mrs. Fisher hung her laundry in a predictable sequence, but altered the order entirely when her husband worked late at the mill. To most, these might have seemed the idle observations of a peculiar child, but Emma's ability to vocalize her findings in cold, calculated terms began to unsettle the adults around her, hinting at a mind that saw far more than it should. The shift from curiosity to dread began on a bleak February morning in 1873. Emma sat at the kitchen table, methodically eating her oatmeal as Greta packed Hinrich's lunch pail. Without warning, Emma looked up, her gray eyes sharp and unyielding, and declared, "Mr. Dietrich will not return home from the brewery today. He will die at precisely 2:14 p.m. The words hung in the air like a sudden frost. Greta nearly dropped the tin pail, her hands trembling as she stammered, "Emma, mein Gott, why would you say such a thing?" Emma's gaze remained fixed, her voice devoid of emotion. "For 17 days, Mr. Dietrich has been drinking from a small brown bottle. Yesterday he consumed 3 times his usual amount. His steps were uneven, 251 instead of his typical 244. When a person's patterns deviate by more than 10%, a significant event occurs within 72 hours. Mr. Dietrich's deviation is 12%. The calculation is straightforward." Heinrich, pulling on his heavy wool coat, froze mid-motion. Johann Dietrich was a known drinker, like many in the quarter, but the notion that Emma had been silently tracking his habits, counting his steps, measuring his intoxication, was deeply disturbing. Her calm, mathematical certainty about his impending death sent a shiver through her parents that had nothing to do with the biting cold outside. At exactly 2:14 p.m. that day, Johann Dietrich collapsed in the brewery's malt room, his body crumpling amid sacks of barley. Dr. Muller, the community's physician, attributed the death to heart failure caused by chronic alcohol poisoning, noting that Dietrich had been drinking heavily and displaying signs of severe anxiety for weeks. But what sent ripples of unease through the German quarter was the precision of Emma's prediction, accurate to the very minute. Word of the girl's prophecy spread like wildfire, igniting fear and fascination in equal measure. Some dismissed it as a grim coincidence, but others recalled the pale child with the calculating eyes and began to wonder what else she might have seen from her kitchen window. The Richtors found themselves the subject of furtive whispers and wary glances at church and market. Father Koller, who had once celebrated Emma's gifts as a divine blessing, now seemed uncertain, his sermons tinged with caution. When Heinrich sought his counsel after a Sunday Mass, the priest's usual warmth was replaced by a strained expression. "Heinrich, my friend," Father Koller said, his Bavarian accent heavy with concern, "perhaps Emma should spend less time watching the neighbors and more time in prayer. God grants gifts, yes, but the devil can twist even the purest talents to dark ends." Heinrich, a practical man whose life revolved around the science of brewing, found the priest's words unsettling. He had always attributed Emma's abilities to an unusual intellect, rather than anything mystical. But the chilling accuracy of her prediction about Dietrich shook his rational worldview. That evening, he sat Emma down for a serious conversation. "Emma, you must tell me the truth," he said, his voice firm but laced with worry. "How did you know about Mr. Dietrich?" Emma's gray eyes met his, calm and unyielding. "I watch, Papa, I count. I remember. Mr. Dietrich's behavior followed a predictable pattern. A 37% increase in alcohol consumption over 17 days, combined with a 20% reduction in food intake, leads to cardiac stress. I calculated the likely time of failure based on his age, weight, and symptoms." Hinrich's blood ran cold. His 11-year-old daughter spoke with the precision of a physician, or something far stranger. "But Emma," he pressed, "how could you know such details about his eating and drinking?" Her response was simple, yet terrifying. "I observe everything, Papa. Every day, every person, every pattern." When she offered to share more of her calculations, Hinrich quickly declined, a primal fear rising within him. That night, as he tucked Emma into her narrow bed, he couldn't shake the sense that his daughter's mind was a doorway to something vast and unknowable, a force that could unravel the fragile threads of their community. The February snow continued to blanket Milwaukee, muffling the sounds of the German quarter and creating a world where secrets could hide in plain sight. Emma lay in her bed, her mind silently processing the day's observations, calculating probabilities that no child should comprehend. In the weeks following Dietrich's death, the atmosphere in the neighborhood grew tense, like a taut wire ready to snap. Emma continued her vigil by the kitchen window, her gray eyes tracking the movements of neighbors with mechanical precision. Hinrich and Greta watched their daughter with growing unease, the child who had once been their pride, now a source of quiet dread. The brewery community, bound by shared labor and heritage, had always been close-knit, but Emma had never truly belonged. While other children played tag or swapped stories in the snowy streets, she sat alone, counting steps, measuring time, and cataloging the habits of those around her. Greta began to notice that Emma's observations were growing more invasive, more unsettling. Over breakfast, Emma might casually mention that Mrs. Weber had been meeting Mr. Kellner behind the brewery every Tuesday afternoon for 6 weeks, or that the Schneider family buried mysterious objects in their garden every Sunday after church. When pressed, Emma would explain that she had simply observed their patterns and calculated the probabilities. "People think they keep secrets," she said one morning, her voice as flat as the blade she used to butter her bread. "But they follow patterns, just like numbers." Hinrich could no longer ignore the growing darkness in his daughter's behavior. One evening as Emma slept, he spoke urgently with Greta. "This isn't right. Greta, children shouldn't know these things, shouldn't speak of them so coldly." Greta's hands trembled as she mended one of Hinrich's shirts, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm frightened, Hinrich. Not just of Emma, but of what the neighbors think. Mrs. Brennan crossed the street to avoid me yesterday. Even Father Kohler hasn't visited since Dietrich's death." Their fears were confirmed 3 days later, when Emma made another chilling prediction. As she peeled potatoes for dinner, she suddenly paused, her gray eyes gleaming with calculation. "Mrs. Weber will be discovered tomorrow at 11 a.m. Her husband will find her with Mr. Kellner in the brewery office. There will be violence." Greta dropped her knife, the clatter echoing in the quiet kitchen. "Emma, you mustn't say such things," she cried. But Emma continued, her voice steady and precise. "Mrs. Weber has arrived at the brewery 7 minutes earlier each week for 6 weeks. Mr. Kellner stays 33 minutes later each day. Tomorrow, Mr. Weber will return from his delivery route 47 minutes early, because his horse is developing lameness in its left front leg. I've tracked its gait for 11 days. Heinrich, standing in the doorway, felt his heart pound. "How do you know about the horse, Emma?" he demanded. "I count her steps when she passes our house," Emma replied. "On March 1st, she favored her right legs 53% of the time. Today, it's 68%. Tomorrow, the lameness will slow the route by 47 minutes. The next morning unfolded exactly as Emma had foretold. Wilhelm Weber returned early from his delivery route and found his wife, Anna, in a compromising embrace with Ernst Kellner in the brewery office. The ensuing confrontation was brutal. Kellner suffered a broken nose and cracked ribs, while Anna was beaten so severely that Dr. Muller was summoned to tend her injuries. The scandal sent shockwaves through the German quarter, but what truly unnerved the community was Emma's precise prediction of the event. Whispers of the witch child grew louder, and the Richtors found themselves increasingly isolated. Neighbors avoided them at church. Children were forbidden from nearing their home, and shopkeepers served them with curt efficiency. Hinrich's standing at the brewery grew precarious, as co-workers shunned him, and Ernst Kellner made it clear the family was no longer welcome at social gatherings. Yet Emma seemed oblivious to the hostility, her mind consumed with her observations and calculations. She began filling a leather journal with numbers, dates, and cryptic notations, its pages a testament to her relentless analysis. Hinrich and Greta dared not read it, fearing what secrets it might hold. As winter gave way to spring, the German quarter felt less like a home, and more like a place of suspicion and dread, with Emma's predictions casting a shadow over every interaction. April brought the first hints of warmth to Milwaukee, but the thaw did little to ease the tension in the German quarter. Emma's journal grew thicker, its pages crowded with intricate charts, maps, and sequences that tracked the behaviors of her neighbors with alarming detail. The community's fear of her manifested in tangible ways. Children were steered away from the Richter house, shopkeepers barely spoke to Greta, and Father Kohler limited his interactions to formal services. Emma, however, seemed to thrive in her isolation, her mind sharpening as social distractions fell away. Dr. Friedrich Müller, the community's physician, became intrigued by her abilities. Trained in Berlin and familiar with unusual mental conditions, he saw Emma's talents through a scientific lens, unlike the superstitious neighbors who whispered of witchcraft. When Hinrich sought his advice, Dr. Müller agreed to examine Emma in his office above the Water Street Pharmacy. During the examination, Emma answered questions with her usual precision, her gray eyes fixed on some distant calculation. "Emma," Dr. Müller asked, "how do you predict these events?" She replied calmly, "I observe patterns and calculate probabilities based on behavioral data. People think their actions are random, but they follow mathematical sequences. With enough data, I can predict outcomes accurately." Intrigued, Dr. Müller asked for an example. Emma flipped through her journal, pointing to a page of meticulous notes. "Mrs. Brennan walks to the rectory every Tuesday and Friday at 3:15 p.m., but doesn't enter the church. She stays for 43 minutes. Father Kohler buys extra candles and wine, and his evening prayers extend by 17 minutes on those days. The correlation is significant." Dr. Muller's breath caught. The implications were scandalous, but Emma's methodical documentation was chilling in its precision. 2 days later, Emma made another prediction that deepened the community's fear. "There will be a fire at the Zimmerman house on Sunday at 8:47 p.m., she announced. "It will spread to 3 neighboring homes and Mr. Zimmerman will not survive." Hinrich, horrified, demanded, "How could you know this, Emma?" Consulting her journal, she explained, "Mr. Zimmerman has been mixing lamp oil with whiskey for 12 days. I've seen him buying excessive amounts of both. His wife left for Chicago yesterday, a pattern seen before major domestic incidents. Their chimney has structural damage based on smoke patterns and soot deposits. The probability of a fire is 93%. Greta wept, unnerved by Emma's clinical tone. Desperate to prove her predictions could be used for good, Hinrich warned Franz Zimmerman, who laughed off the warning but promised to be cautious. On Sunday, at exactly 8:47 p.m., flames erupted from the Zimmerman house, spreading to 3 adjacent homes before the fire brigade could respond. Zimmerman's body was found in the kitchen, overwhelmed by the blaze. Emma's prediction, accurate to the minute, sent terror through the community. Hinrich's warning, overheard by brewery workers, fueled rumors that Emma was not just predicting events, but somehow shaping them. The Richters became pariahs, and Emma continued her calculations, noting the fire as another data point in her journal. The aftermath of the Zimmerman fire transformed the German quarter into a place of fear and suspicion. 3 families lost their homes, and Emma's precise prediction became undeniable proof of her unsettling power. Hinrich's brewery co-workers shunned him, and Ernst Kellner barred the family from social events. Emma, unfazed, continued filling her journal with complex probability matrices, tracking multiple variables and predicting events weeks into the future. Greta grew terrified of the journal's contents, unable to reconcile the cold calculations with her daughter's once innocent nature. On a Tuesday morning in late April, Emma's latest observation pushed her parents to the breaking point. "Mama, there's a disruption in the pattern today," she said, her eyes fixed on the street. Mrs. Brennan deviated from her Tuesday routine. She left for the river at 2:47 p.m., showing signs of distress. Her step length decreased by 12%, and her breathing was irregular. "She's planning something final." Greta's heart sank as Emma calmly predicted a suicide attempt with an 87% probability. Hinrich, informed by his frantic wife, rushed to the river and found Margaret Brennan on a dock, staring into the water with despair. He spent hours coaxing her back to safety, averting the tragedy Emma had foreseen. When he returned home, Emma noted the intervention in her journal, adjusting her calculations for third-party interference with clinical detachment. Hinrich realized his daughter was not just predicting events, but analyzing human suffering as if it were a mathematical puzzle. That night, Hinrich and Greta decided they could no longer stay in Milwaukee. Emma's abilities had made their lives untenable, and her emotional detachment from the tragedies she predicted was as terrifying as the predictions themselves. They began planning to flee, hoping to find a place where Emma's mind could be channeled into something less destructive. But Emma's calculations were not yet complete, and her final revelation would shake the German quarter to its core. On May 1, 1873, as spring sunlight flooded the kitchen, Emma approached Hinrich with her journal. "Papa, I've uncovered a pattern that explains everything," she said, her voice steady. She revealed a conspiracy involving 7 men: Wilhelm Weber, Franz Kellner, Ernst's brother Hans, Zimmermann's cousin Otto, Klaus Brennan, Gustav Wolff, and Hermann Kruger, who met secretly every Wednesday at midnight in the Kellner brewery's basement. Emma's charts detailed their movements, showing how they avoided main streets and synchronized their schedules. Her calculations estimated they had stolen $47,000 from the brewery over 26 months, with Ernst Kellner as the mastermind. She pointed to evidence of their increased spending, inconsistent with their incomes, and noted that Kellner had been watching their house at night, likely suspecting Emma knew his secret. "We are in danger, Papa," she said. "The probability of them acting against us is 84%, within 72 hours. Hinrich, overwhelmed, shared Emma's findings with Dr. Muller under cover of darkness. The physician, stunned by the journal's precision, recognized the danger to the Richtors. Using his connections, he arranged for Hinrich to secure a job at a Minnesota brewery, providing a pretext for their escape. That night, May 2, 1873, the Richtors fled Milwaukee in Dr. Muller's wagon, leaving behind their home and the journal as evidence. Emma's final prediction, made as they departed, foretold that the theft ring would be exposed within 6 months, with 3 conspirators not surviving the investigation. In November 1873, federal investigators uncovered Ernst Kellner's scheme, arresting him for embezzling over $50,000. Wilhelm Weber died in an apparent suicide, Otto Steinberg in a suspicious accident, and Hermann Kruger from a heart attack that mirrored poisoning symptoms, exactly as Emma had calculated. In New Ulm, Minnesota, the Richtors rebuilt their lives, with Emma studying under a mathematics professor who saw her abilities as scientific rather than supernatural. By 1875, they relocated again, vanishing from historical records. Emma's story became a whispered legend in Milwaukee, a cautionary tale of a mind too powerful for the world to contain, her journal a relic of truths too dangerous to be known.